First of all, thank you for joining us on this revolting day. I don't know wherever you are, unless you're working from abroad, in which case I'm sure you're having a lovely time, but it's absolutely horrible here today. It's wet, it's cold, it's raining, but there you go. It is the autumn. What can you expect? This is our monthly deep dive into the world of marketing. And for those that are perhaps new to Pimento, can I just say thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Knight. I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento, independent network of around 175 agencies and consultants that offer marketing services across 97 different marketing disciplines. I hear you say, are there really 97? Apparently there are. To ambitious brands both here in the UK and internationally. In turn, those agencies employ around about 7,500 people. So we've got lots of experts in lots of different fields that help brands grow. We're recording today's session, so I hope you're okay with that. If you want to turn on your camera and smile throughout, then that'd be fantastic. Always great to see you as well as hear you. And please remember to use the chat box to ask any questions you might have of the panel. As always, we want to make today's session as interactive as possible. Okay, so we're talking youth today. The world of marketing is evolving rapidly, and as we all know, to stay ahead, you need to understand the younger generation. It's critical. Today's webinar delves into the world of youth marketing, focusing on strategies and insights to better connect us with this vibrant demographic. Now, the younger generation primarily consists of Gen Z and now the emerging Gen A or Gen Alpha. Their values, habits, and preferences are vastly different from their previous generations, and as a father, I can testify to that. Gen Z comprises people born between 1996, so their maximum age is 27 today, and 2010, so their minimum age would be around 13. This generation's identity has been shaped by the digital age. I mean, they've grown up with digital. They are primarily concerned about climate anxiety, a shifting financial landscape, and of course, COVID-19. All of those are impacted on their lives and their attitudes. And second, they are really the second youngest generation, with millennials before, and of course, Generation Alpha after. Gen Alpha are the children of millennials, and they're the younger end of Gen Z, and are expected to reach 2.2 billion globally by the end of next year. So each of these groups are both significant and important, both in terms of scale. And what we're going to focus on today is really to get to understand them and what we should be doing to reach them and where we should be reaching them. In my quest, I'm excited and very pleased to have a brilliant panel of experts. So we're going to bring into the limelight now. We've got James Hoyle, who is the creative director at XYZ, which is now a 160/90 company. They recently sold to them. And James joined XYZ in May 2022 as their creative director, following a 3-year stint at Tin Man Communications and previous roles at MSL and Weber Shandwick. Hoyle's career has resulted in award-winning client campaigns across content, communications, but now he's fully committed to his new world of experiential. And XYZ's clients, in terms of how their experience is being borne out for Gen Z and Alpha, is on Nike, Levi's, Moncler, Lego, Apple, the Children's Society, Google, and Red Bull, to name but a few. Susannah Morgan is the Deputy Managing Director of Energy PR. Susannah has been specialising in PR for more than 20 years, working across a variety of B2B and B2C brands and household names. Energy PR has a rich seam of youth marketing experience, with a particular focus on the toy industry, and they promote toys from Harry Potter to Star Wars collectibles through to trampolines and laser guns. Oliver Seal is Agency Director at Connect Management. Connect Management is the UK's fastest growing social influencer agency. They represent over 150 of the UK's top social first creators. In under 4 years, Content Management has become one of the UK's biggest creator representation companies, working with several well-known clients such as Spotify, Amazon, and PepsiCo. And they boast an impressive roster of talent, including Eurovision's Sam Ryder, the England Lionesses, and Brandon B. Mitun Thaker is the co-founder of Crypt, KRPT. They're a culturally led, full-service creative agency that's its culture be the creator. And Mitun's overall goal in this industry is to directly work with brand budgets in a positive, progressive, global cultural sense, working with creators. He's passionate about providing a platform where it's possible for talent from diverse backgrounds to thrive, and is always looking to champion like-minded entrepreneurs. And finally, Tom Sneddon is the co-founder and managing partner at Supernova, which is a business that's now part of Atomic. Over the last 15 years of experience, he's got gained experience, shall I say, at working at leading social and influencer agencies such as Isobar, Ogilvy, and VCCP. His former clients include The Guardian, Heineken, and Man United, and he helped launch TikTok across EMEA, leading the platform's release across 19 markets over the course of 2 years and growing their in-house creator team. So we've got 5 leading experts, all of whom have got significant experience targeting this particular audience, and hopefully they can share some of their insights, and hopefully you'll be able to take away with you today some sort of key things that you could be doing in your marketing to attract this audience and attract brands to work with you. So let's start, if I may, with Oliver. Can we talk a little bit about the kind of Gen Z consumers, and I kind of, how do they differ from their predecessors, from the millennials, both in terms of their expectations and how I guess they engage and interact with brands?
Sure, yeah. And thanks, Stephen, for the intro. I think, yeah, I mean, this is probably the biggest and the most common question that's coming up for any brand owner, any agency owner. It's, how the hell do we reach these Gen Z audiences? Where are they? What are they consuming? What do I need to put out to get my product or service in their hands, essentially, and acquire them as a customer? I think the most important thing to firstly say with Gen Z is there's been a massive shift in how they're consuming content, where they're consuming the content, and what they're doing day to day. Traditionally, you've got above the line, you've got out of home, you've got TV ads, you've got billboards. And although that does still work, Gen Z are not historically in front of TVs. They're not historically looking at billboards. There's a massive shift in where they're consuming content, and platforms like TikTok, platforms like Instagram, the Meta space, YouTube Shorts are massively on the rise. And brands need to essentially innovate or take their content and what they've been doing traditionally and now merge it into the Gen Z social space if they do want to keep up with Gen Z, and if they want to reach them and if they want to get them on their books in terms of customers. I'd say that the two important things to mention from a brand standpoint and when you're putting together your marketing is number one, it has to be engaging. We've all probably seen the quotes and news articles about attention spans, and Gen Z can't pay attention. Gen Z's attention spans are as low as possible, and that's only going to get bigger and bigger. Their attention span is only going to shorten, which is absolutely challenging for brands because they are going to have a snapshot, maybe 1 or 2 seconds to capture, and if they don't, see you later. You're losing a customer, you're losing LTV, you're losing the lifetime value of their spend. So I think the key thing here that I wanted to get across is the story that you tell needs to be engaging. You need to hit them straight away to capture their attention. And once you've captured that attention, what Gen Z favor over many other sort of age brackets is they want to see social proof and they want to see authentic reviews. Social proof is every other one of their friends or people in their group using the product, talking about the product. Are they talking about something that they've seen online and they ask whether their friends or colleagues have also seen it? Reviews online is absolutely massive nowadays, especially with TikTok. I do it, I'm Gen Z, and before I purchase anything, take a coffee machine or an air fryer that I'm going to upgrade at Christmas, I didn't Google a review. I didn't go on YouTube. I went straight on TikTok. I typed the product in, and I'm immediately served with global content in America, in Europe, in the UK of people reviewing the product, using the product, and most importantly, giving their personal view on how they're finding it. So if brands want to capture that Gen Z audience, if they want to jump into that space, the expectation they should have is what worked traditionally isn't going to work for Gen Z, and they need to be super flexible and innovative in terms of the message and content that they're pushing out. And sort of to end on, celebrities are where the new consumer focused brands are heading. You've probably all seen Prime with Logan Paul, with KSI, Mr. Beast and Feastables. And what that's basically showing is these Gen Z audiences and people look up to these celebs. They will purchase whatever they endorse, whatever they promote. So it's absolutely very smart to get a celeb on board to be that ambassador or to be the face. And then what you'll see is this traction slowly start to churn over of people in the Gen Z space that become a customer and stay a customer for the long time.
Thank you, Ollie. Mitun, that sounds to me like this is a bit of a cultural shift here. You know, we're not seeing obviously just not a change in the way in which we communicate and how we communicate, but actually this is impacting on culture. You need to just unmute, sorry, sir.
There we go. Yeah, Ollie, I thought that was really sort of on the money there in terms of the type of content and influencers that you work with. And I think to take a step back here, and as you said there, Stephen, you know, what are brands' roles within culture now? And I think that's where I think you have to take a bit of a higher level view on it and actually say, what are Gen Z and how are they actually behaving and what are their relationships with brands now? And I think gone are the days where, you know, where millennials, boomers, Gen Xers kind of saw these very faceless brands and kind of absorbed any information that we were given. Gen Z are very much about questioning and having purpose. And I think from a brand's perspective, I think this is where you really need to be able to take a step back and ask yourself the question around, like, what is it that I stand for within culture? And how is it that the communities and the consumers, let's say Gen Z as your audience, how is it that I'm communicating to them that actually it's almost on a peer-to-peer level? And I think, you know, I get surprised all the time, even with our team, who are predominantly Gen Z now, when the amount of confidence that they have in terms of questioning, you know, what is it that we're asking them to do, or what is the brief, what are the objectives of this particular client? And I think that needs to be intrinsic to every level of a brand sort of setup, not just around a particular output, whether it's content or an experience, but almost about, you know, from an identity point of view, exactly what you stand for. And I think going back into, you know, some of the stats that Ollie said there, you know, we found that 61% of Gen Z are on 8 hours or more a day on their devices. I think this is where information and the commodity of information is massive now. And, you know, with that, taking that slightly broader look at it, there is a sense of pessimism there. And, you know, it's kind of, this is where brands, I think, can play a really interesting role culturally, where they are living in a time where things are quite, you know, there's a lot of unrest going on. And I think brands can play a really interesting role to bring a bit of value and bring a bit of, you know, positivity, I guess, into their lives and actually have that peer-to-peer relationship that they're looking for. I think, you know, things that we talk about a lot are transparency and humanity. Giving a bit more of a cultural face to your brand is really, really important. Because I don't believe that brands in, you know, who don't kind of take that perspective are really going to be here in 100 years or 50 years time. And it's really about questioning, going to that point around, like, what is it you stand for, and taking some of those broad objectives of your brand around, like, you know, we stand for transparency, or we stand for, you know, innovation. And then what does that actually mean within culture now? And then what does that actually mean for the audience that you're going for?
Thank you very much, Mitun. Susannah, I'll go to you, if I may, because in practical terms, you know, you take a brief from a client and they're trying to reach this audience. What's your view in terms of what's the starting point, and actually how do you sort of differ the process in terms of how you create PR and communications when you're trying to actually tailor a campaign to reach this Gen X audience?
That's a really interesting question, and I guess the answer is similar to everybody else that's contributing to this, but you start with the audience, and what Oliver and Mitun have already said, understanding where they are, what they want from brands, and how they consume that information is everything. Because it doesn't matter what you say or how you want to say it, if you cannot land it in a way that will be well received, then you're just wasting your time. So that's where we start. And that's where anybody should really start, is understanding your audience. And that comes on to how trends and things change over time as well, because Mittun's in a fortunate position to be heavily Gen Z in his team. But if you are trying to communicate with Gen Z, you cannot pretend that you understand them unless you spend a lot of time or you employ people who are in Gen Z. And you cannot be ahead of the curve for Gen Z because they are the curve. So you will always be playing catch up. And if you want to play catch up really, really quickly, then understanding where they are means employing them. So if you're trying to do social content, for example, that communicates with Gen Z, hire Gen Zs to do it, because there are so many examples of brands who try and sort of emulate the language, that humor, the tone of voice, and it's just massively cringy. So it's something that everybody needs to consider, whether they are a B2C brand or a B2B brand. How are you going to be communicating with Gen Zs? It's not really something that we get a brief for now, because Gen Zs are already making up 20% of the workforce. So no matter what your business is, if you employ people, you need to consider a Gen Z audience. If you are communicating to a buying audience, you will need to be getting Gen Z in at some stage. In the next 10 years, they've got big buying power in businesses. So if you're not already considering Gen Z, if it's not on your brief to agencies, then you will be behind the curve very quickly.
Okay, I mean, James, I'd like kind of to build on that. And thank you very much, Susannah, because I think there's some clear points there. Actually bringing people into the workforce you haven't already got them, or actually, electing to actually have both an advisory board or having younger people basically involved in the creative process. James, specifically in campaigns that you create, how do you bring youth into the development of the campaigns? And equally too, can you give us some examples of stuff that's worked really, really well and perhaps stuff that hasn't worked quite so well?
Yeah, love to. Funnily enough, we've got a prime experience happening this weekend over at Piccadilly, which I could talk about in a minute, which is a perfect example of where this is all going, I think. But in terms of from a creative perspective, like I'm fortunate enough that I work in a studio of 25 plus predominantly Gen Z individuals, so it's kind of hardwired into the work that we do. And without that, we literally, as Susannah kind of pointed out, we'd be absolutely nowhere. And I think for me, it's kind of weird because I was just racking my brains about the last time I was dealing in a non-Gen Z brief, and it's just ubiquitous in terms of that targeting. So it's almost become kind of like like a hygiene factor. So you do have to tap into that market directly. And I think for me, the only way that you can really stay relevant creatively and anywhere near that curve is to have not only kind of Gen Z, but like genuine diversity of Gen Z in that creative process. And if I was starting an agency now, I never have. I don't think I'm ever brave enough to it, but that would be my USP. It'd be bringing people in diversity of background, diversity of social class, neurodiversity, because that is, I think, when you start to see, a genuinely kind of, bleeding edge type of creative approach and execution. So that's kind of what we do here. And we talked a bit, I think it was Oliver that talked about kind of, sort of the social first approach now. And I don't know, I'm sure there's some stats out there about social spending overtaking kind of traditional kind of TV and whatnot for the first time ever. Like social first is absolutely right. But I think you can even take a step back from that in terms of creative and start to think about it in terms of community first. Like, what's the audience centric again, like we said, what is that community sort of, doing? How do they show up? How do they share, IP? How do they share ideas? All of this audience are, I work with predominantly creatives, but they're all creators as well. So, they're going to sniff out, what's good and what's bad a mile away. So I think that community sort of focus for me is really, really, really important. That's how we typically approach all of our projects here. And that means if we haven't got the experts or the diversity in the building, that's a whole other conversation. We could have a whole other webinar on that, right? But if we haven't got them in the building, then we go out and find them. We have an amazing network of Gen Z creatives that we have to bring in to ensure that we're staying relevant.
Thank you, James. That all makes a huge amount of sense. Tom, can I come to you? Because one of the critical things that we've spoken about is the fact that when it comes to taking a stand on social issues and engaging with Gen Z, there's massive risks, but there's obviously significant rewards if you're prepared to go that way. We've seen obviously some massive mistakes in the last 12 months, particularly from North American beer brands and others. But I mean, we live in a very difficult political environment at the moment. And actually, if you are going to make a stance, if you are going to, pinpoint an issue, it could be sustainability, it could be LGBT, whatever it happens to be. What's the starting point, and how can you advise brands whether they should or shouldn't dip their toe in this water?
Yeah, of course. No, you're absolutely right. This is a big area. I think what's really important, there's a few layers to this, is looking at the comparison of Gen Z to other generations. These are more values orientated than any generation previously. Broadly, they're more educated, they're more racially and ethically diverse, and they're more progressive in mindset. This is 100% now about talking to a values-driven kind of audience. So much so that actually transparency, trustworthiness, all those signaling that we've been talking about as a panel so far is a massive motivating factor for brand engagement. But ultimately, underneath all of this, and given their mindset, this has to be about action, not words. I think the beer branding question, it was very much a mouthpiece as opposed to actually building on what that stood for, why they were doing that, and the deeper story behind that relationship. But what's really clear and telling is in the choices and the decisions and the actions of this audience are massively lent on brands being true to their values, standing up for that, leaving no stone unturned, and ultimately building partners where there is that shared trust, there is that shared value. Forrester came out with a massive stat a couple of weeks ago that said 45%, sorry, a third of Gen Z said they would unfollow, hide, or block brands on a weekly basis if they didn't feel they were in line with their own personal values. So I think everything about taking a stand is not suddenly overnight becoming a values-driven brand. It's who are you? What do you stand for? How do you add value as a business? And how are you true to that? I think the more you can drop that fourth wall and the more you can present yourself as a persona or as a brand where there is trust and belief and connection throughout, then you can build up that trust. But this is definitely not washing. This is not rainbow washing. This is not anything else. You do not attach yourself to a thing and ride the coattails. It has to be deeply entrenched in who you are, how you are, and what you do.
That's really interesting and fascinating too, when you think about the fact we have two major elections next year, one in North America and one potentially in the UK, and actually how political parties are actually going to have to actually cope and deal with this audience, because a significant number of people in that 18 to 27-year-old category are now going to be eligible to vote. So that will be interesting. And as a build on that one, Tom, because there's another part really to it, which is this whole issue about personalization and privacy. One of the issues that we were acutely aware of is that this particular audience are very worried about their personal privacy. There's been so many data breaches. They're very careful about what they do and what they don't do when it comes to sharing their own personal information. How do you kind of balance that up with the need to actually personalize your communications? Because there's an expectation that every piece of communications will be relevant, in the right place, the right time, and talking to me in my language. How do you do that? Because it seems tough for me.
So it's really interesting. There's a weird relationship between the two, actually, and ultimately it's born out of value. At one end, you're absolutely right. These are massively protected about their online personas, be it cookies, anonymous browsers, encrypting their communications. But equally, as the team have said, like they're spending hours upon hours of their daily life consuming content that's ultimately driven through personalization. The entire TikTok algorithm is based on the for you, because you're giving away so much information about yourself. In the context of what's going on for this audience, there was a really interesting study done by UNESCO and the UN a couple of years ago, basically asking Gen Z to rank what's most important to them in the world. And privacy came out 5th at that point, ahead of war, judicial reform, healthcare system. So there is this weird pressure and duality of, yes, I want personalization, I want value, but I want to protect my privacy. I think what's interesting and where brands probably have an opportunity, and building on everything we've all talked about, is that trust, and how do we actually build out a value and an openness to what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. One of the big step changes, I think, and again, having been 2 years in the mothership, TikTok's growth through the privacy and personalization conundrum is really interesting. On one side, you've got all that kind of external pressure about, well, what's happening with my data and who's holding that data and what do you do with that? But actually internally, they are ranked as one of the safest, if not the safest platform in the world out there. They're spending huge amounts of time working with external groups like the 614 group and the TAG mindset to make sure that how that information is used, how you can be in control of your own privacy, and what measures are being put into the platform to protect that experience. So 13 to 17-year-olds have a compulsory 60-minute cap on their app experience. Equally, you've got the ability to tune out of conversations that you don't want to be exposed to and you don't want to be part of. So I think the bigger question here is, so long as you can create something of value, so long as you're clear and transparent from the get-go as to what you're intending to do and how that will elevate your brand experience, then actually you're going to see more and more kind of experience economy brands thrive in that space. For example, insurance is going through a massive step change right now, where we're moving away from one-size-fits-all cover into much more bespoke, short-termist cover, be that through pet insurance, auto cover, and healthcare. But it's all based on personalization and privacy working together, so long as there is value in that product.
Yeah, that's got to be an area where AI and actuaries can actually really make a significant difference. I think the whole concept of having to buy multiple different insurance policies, which we all have to do, both the ones we want and the ones we have to do legally, and trying to synthesize that into a single proposition is going to be really interesting. Susannah, I want to come back to you, if I may, because one of the areas that I know your agency work on is both B2B and B2C. And the old days, we always used to talk about the old days, last year or the year before that, when it came to communications and marketing to different audiences, B2B or B2C or B2B2C, you kind of started with the premise that all people are people. In this case, I just wonder, are you using different channels to communicate to those different groups, or is it that different tone, or is it both?
That's a really interesting question, actually. And one of many ways that Gen Z is changing the workforce is that they don't behave differently at home to the way they do at work. So generations that went before would have a sort of professional persona, and their social media habits wouldn't overlap with their professional habits. And I think Gen Z is changing that. And you can even see on LinkedIn how, and I think lockdown sort of precipitated it as well, actually. But if you look at the content that's now acceptable and freely shared on LinkedIn, it's totally different to how it was 5 years ago. There's no rigidity around you must be professional, it must be business related, because they don't split themselves out like that. So really, there is no B2B way of communicating with Gen Z. There is just the right way to communicate with Gen Z. So everything that's gone before in this discussion would still apply if you're a B2B business or you were a B2C business. They still want authenticity and transparency in their B2B interactions as well, whether they are being communicated to by a B2B organization or they are in their professional roles, which are, some of them are in their second jobs now already. So they still favor businesses that can demonstrate that genuine value, like Tom has already said, ethical business practices, that commitment to social responsibility. But we do find that traditional sales tactics are much less effective because of what we've already talked around with the authenticity, the engaging content being important. So user testimonials, case studies, influencer endorsements are really, really key in B2B as with B2C. So if you are a B2B organization, you should be thinking around thought leaders, industry experts. You need to be thinking around peer-to-peer recommendations within Gen Z. They also are exceptionally resourceful in seeking out the information that they want. So back to Tom's point about walking the walk, you have to be very clear on your stance on social justice issues and your overall brand purpose, because they will hold you to account. So you can't suddenly wake up and think, we need to be communicating with this new audience. I know what they're like. We'll do a bit of, put this on our website that we offer a, I don't know, community support scheme, and then not have any evidence of that at all, because you'd be better off not having done that in the first place. The blow up will be so significant. So really it comes back to the point we were talking about before, is understanding your audience, speaking their language, using their acronyms, sharing their sense of humor. The only way you can do that will resonate is to ask them, work with them, follow them, hire them, there is really no difference anymore between how a B2B organisation should work compared to a B2C organisation. So if you are a very, very dry business, look to Nike, look to Fenty Beauty, look at the people who are doing it really well and emulate that. So an example would be General Electric, pretty dry. They were one of our clients doing a engineering apprenticeship program very specifically around Stafford, and it could not get further removed from the excitement of Fenty Beauty or Nike. But they need to get grassroots inquiries up. They need to have engineering apprentices, otherwise there are going to be no engineers. So it's a problem you've got to crack. You can't ignore it. And they maximized Instagram and peer-to-peer recommendation. Gen Z's in the role, explaining what their role is like. That sort of inclusive user-generated content is really key, and it's not solely the premise of a B2C organisation.
Thank you, Susannah. Ollie, I mean, in your world, I mean, how much of your business is now B2B versus B2C, and who would you say in the B2B space is doing it correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing massively, and I think one of our clients and somebody who's been in the space for years and have now jumped onto TikTok and socials is NatWest. You know, when the brief came in and when we started working with them, NatWest are a traditional branch of a bank that you'll probably find on the high street, and you wouldn't essentially think that you would see them on TikTok or Instagram and YouTube. NatWest came to us with this challenge of their business banking numbers weren't where they wanted them to be. They wanted to reach Gen Z, and what they had on offer in terms of business banking was fantastic, right? But they weren't able to communicate it. They had done some research where they had found about 60 or 65% of Gen Z had a side hustle as well as their full-time job, or whether they were at university. And what we did with NatWest was we launched them on TikTok and put together a really awesome campaign with 4 different creators on our books. One of them is 19 years old, and her business is her as an influencer. So there was a really nice play about how being an influencer is a full-time job. Another creator was in the personal training and fitness space, and there was another creator, Therese, who actually left her full-time job to now become an influencer full-time. So lots of different angles and plays that we did. But I'd say the most important thing with B2B is sort of twofold. The first thing is your tone of voice. On socials, your tone of voice has to be different. Ryanair do a fantastic job of blurring the lines, and that's how you reach Gen Z. That's how you get them talking about your brand and product with their friends and family. And then one more thing, and Susannah and James, I know you touched on it, and just to add is find a B2B influencer. They're on the rise. There are so many creators and influencers who work with the likes of QuickBooks, with NatWest, Xero, all these accounting and finance tools that are now spending on social media and influencers. So if your objectives are B2B led and success is also B2B led for the brand, you're absolutely able to pair that with a creator who has a business background or an entrepreneur background. Ali Abdow is a fantastic example. He left his corporate B2B job, and he's now a full-time YouTuber and content creator in the B2B space. So yeah, the creators are out there, and you just need to go ahead and find them and make sure they fit your brand, make sure they fit the values you're looking for.
Scary fact I read the other day, and thank you, Ollie, on that, which is a third of spend next year is forecast to be in social. Third of total marketing spend. It's just, you know, it's a phenomenal shift compared to 5 years or 10 years ago. And a kind of general point, which you kind of hinted at there, the idea that everyone's got kind of a side gig, a side hustle, as you said. It's all the people we've employed recently is really interesting, is that actually they do come to us when we have conversations with them, and they are all, without all of them, actually have got something else that they've got in their life that they're trying to monetize, that they're focused on in addition to their day jobs. And I guess that throws out the question of actually, how do you attract these people to your business? How can you find, you know, more good people in this space? What do you need to do in terms of work preferences, and what expectations these people have? It's kind of a general question to all of you, really, because you've all got different experiences here and you're all employing people. So anyone on this particular questions?
If you don't mind, guys, if I jump in first, because we have at the moment a number of clients who are HR or employee benefits based, specifically targeting this market, not to mention employing them ourselves in our agency, and we have 4 different generations in our agency, which is a challenge in itself. But it's Tom's point about them being very, very values driven is crucial. So you've kind of got to throw away what went before as an employer if you're trying to attract Gen Zs, and offer them what they want, because otherwise they won't stay, they won't come to your business in the first place. They don't stay in the same way that generations before did anyway. So they are looking for a benefits package, more importantly than salary benefits, and career progression and training, because they have the eye on their next career move. They're more likely to move after 2 years than any generation before. So you have to get them in, train them up, give them reasons to stay, which will not be salary based alone, but they will, that obviously is still important. That high ethical standards comes into their employers as well as brands that they buy from or engage with. You need to demonstrate that you will walk that walk, because if you sell a proposition to somebody coming into the business and then fail to deliver, they will leave straight away. And because of their side hustles, they don't have the need to stay in the way that perhaps somebody else would. But how you communicate with them when you have them in is when they are your employees is the key to keeping them, because that sort of hierarchical comm structure is dead now. We've heard before around how Gen Zs like to communicate. They want to be involved in those decision-making processes. They want town hall comms. They don't want to be briefed from the C-suite on what they should be expected to deliver and then just get on with it. They want meaningful work, they want learning and development to be prioritized, and they want that work-life harmony.
And the recent kind of switch with people trying to be encouraged to go back to the office. So we've seen it obviously in the financial industry. We've seen it obviously in consulting. Agencies, I think, have tried to get their people back into the office and are still focusing on that. With this particular audience, there has always been the case that actually they love to learn from each other. Peer-to-peer learning is really, really important. And actually, a lot of the Gen Zs that I've spoken to have actually welcomed the opportunity to go back in the office, but it's on their terms. You know, they basically, they still want that flexibility. They still want to be able to actually, look after their dog and work from home on a Monday sort of thing, or a Friday. Ollie, you must have this all the time. You've got beautiful offices. You've just taken all this wonderful space. How many people are actually in the office on a daily basis now?
We have, well, we're 5 days a week in, so we don't have a hybrid or a work from home model. Call us crazy, but we love it, and I think we're seeing the results every single month. A lot of our employees on the talent management side are either Gen Z or it's their first job out of university. Slightly different on the strategy side because it's more strategic, but we find people want to collab together. They want to partner on work. COVID was crazy for every single business employee and CEO, but what we saw coming out of COVID is Gen Zs want to thrive with each other. They don't want to be working at home. If they are, maybe it's 1 or 2 marketing space and creative space is you lock yourself paper, pen, you become creative and you put ideas and thoughts together. And so we've definitely seen a rise in wanting to be in the and if they're not in the office for whatever reason, they're gunning to basically come back in.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's kind of confirmed what I thought. I mean, the whole area of culture and work now is a mishmash of actually how people work. What's your approach as an agency?
So we I guess class ourselves and see ourselves as an in-community agency. So as a team of creatives and strategists and thinkers, I think it's important, especially if you're trying to be relevant within culture, that you are completely immersed in it. So we, as a team, as a policy, I guess, we hire and we bring people into our agency that are truly passionate about the creative scenes that we're trying to help brands exist in and have a credible voice within. And from a I guess like a leadership point of view, I think that comes top down. So it's something that we're really passionate about, and I think you have to practice what you preach. You know, we're you know, selling these ideas of, you know, helping brands really practice what they do, and I think even the modern day agency, in order, you have to have that space for you to do that as well. And I think from our perspective, we put a system in about 18 months ago where members of our team, you know, whatever their passion is, whether it's a side hustle or whether it's they want to go to exhibitions or whether it's they want to even just go to an artist that they really want to see, they have an allowance to do that, because I think it's really important that there is a space. Agencies hire, you know, brands hire agencies for us to be, you know, a bit reactive and a bit agile. And I think that's our role to play within brands in today's world. And that's the difficulty. Brands can't typically move as quickly as agencies. So it's our luxury, I guess, to be able to do that. So I think you have to implement that type of thinking all the way through. And if you do that, it usually reflects in the best type of work, because we're all human beings. We get inspired. We know, we see whatever we're going to in our private lives, in our passions, and we try and put that back into our work, or as much as we possibly can.
Thanks, Mitun. Can I come to you, Tommy, or mate? I'll ask you a question that relates, going back onto the kind of question of influencer here, if I may, and talking a little bit about actually best practice. And we spoke about the kind of the impact that influencers have on decision-making processes for this audience, both B2B and B2C. In terms of creating that authenticity, is there not a disconnect between actually having influencers who are paid for and the reality of Gen Z audiences wanting authenticity? Sometimes that kind of seems to be in conflict.
It's a really interesting debate. And I think you will absolutely see partnerships where you start to question how and why and who. And at its heart, ultimately, influencer marketing is about uncovering those shared values and amplifying an alignment which hopefully goes beyond the price. I think everyone's been talking about the same broad point, which is this is about trust, this is about openness, and this is about that sense that this is more than just a partnership. So I think you're starting to see more and more long-term ambassadors where it feels like it's naturally part of their feed, and there's an aesthetic and a quality and an endorsement which isn't scripted. But equally, I think that the future of influence marketing is going to be less mass and more niche. I think we all have our own personal feeds, our own personal projects. And the idea that influencer marketing is a one-size-fits-all is almost the antithesis of what we're actually saying. As media gets more and more fragmented, so too will influencer marketing be talking to the specifics and the personals and the relatables. And because we're all unique and because we all have those unique relationships, I think it's going to be much, much more deep-rooted in how can you actually go beyond the normal and beyond the obvious. So yes, there are some brilliant fundamentals, which I'm pretty sure everyone has tattooed on their go-to guide for influencer marketing. So it is always going to be about the key topics, the key talent, and making sure the impact is totally on point. But arguably, especially for this audience that we're talking about, the bit I'm really excited about is I think the future creative brief is probably in the comments section. I think there is so much to be learned and found in what's in people's fingertips. What are they actually saying? Who are they actually enjoying? What is it that they're adding and creating value for? And what is the opportunity for brands to come in and amplify and add value beyond constantly presenting passive broadcast field of dreams style, if you say it, they will buy. Like, we are now moving into a space where this is about genuine feedback loops. Ask a question, take on board the comments, respond, engage, build out that dialogue, because social is more than one-way traffic. Similarly, once you've got into that pattern, who are your key community? What is it you can help them with? Using influencer marketing to actually extend and amplify and change what might be a conversation that you want to be part of. But I think the principle will ultimately be experimentation. There is no golden goose. One of the brilliant, most exciting bits about influencer marketing remains the idea that this is changing at the speed of culture. So how can you experiment often? How can you grow and learn? How can you do all these things to move away from the vanity of follower reach and everything else that is just wrong with how this was originally started? But I think coming back to everything we've talked about, it is that authenticity. It is that trust. It is that moment of connection and making sure that you've provided value in that exchange. And I think if you genuinely do that, the money is almost secondary because you're creating something of worth.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, that kind of leads me on to kind of my last and final question today, which is about money, which is this idea that they are obviously very financially prudent. Whilst there is an appreciation for luxury and premium brands, there's also the need to kind of reconcile their love for fast fashion and their environmental concerns. So I don't know how you kind of square that particular circle, as it were, James. I mean, you work with Gucci on one hand, and you work with high street fashion brands that aren't Gucci. What do you see when it comes to that particular conundrum?
We do work with a pretty broad spectrum. We actually, I'm going to drop a stat here, Stephen, if I may, because we had a recent event ourselves on kind of luxury, and we called it Luxury Refocus, which is looking at it through this sort of this Gen Z lens. And according to sort of some of our kind of forecasters, they're talking about 70% of luxury spending being through Gen Z by 2025. And then when you move on to like 2030, it's going to triple thanks to Gen Alpha entering the scene. So there is, despite these financial pressures, there is a genuine power of spend here amongst this community. And I think for us it comes down to the idea of this audience buying into a brand and not necessarily so much from a brand. Gone are the days where you were kind of grateful just for the opportunity to buy these products. Now it's about brands, luxury brands, understanding that they need the consumers, particularly at the younger end, to start spending their time on them first. And actually the data says that if they're willing to spend time with you, then the money will come. And we see that a lot with our experiential activity with the likes of Gucci, or we did a very big piece of work last year at the end of London Fashion Week, which was for Moncler, which is called Moncler Genius, where they collaborated with a number of other brands to create what was sort of the event of that whole kind of period. And the attendance was like, we had like 20,000 folk come down to Olympia. I don't know what the average attendance of an EFL football match is, but 20,000 people coming down from all of the those kind of potential age groups. But a huge focus was on Gen Z, and you're talking about jackets at like $3,000-4,000 at a time, but they're still they were willing to come. They're willing to spend their time, and their intention was ultimately to spend there as well. So we look at it in terms of that kind of culture of, sometimes it's about the scarcity of experience, sometimes it's about the democratization of experience for this audience. And I think nothing like smashing through comments to keep you honest in terms of what you're doing, for Tom's kind of commentary. But I think the one thing I wanted to add about how, particularly with experiences and how they work very similarly with influencer marketing, is that ultimately I think we sort of start to see the value of collaboration a lot in terms of what we do, working with both of these types of brand. And you're starting to see the lines blur with the high street, and you have for a while with very, very luxe brands. But I think for me it's about if there's a collaboration there that's adding the value, that starts to sort of become this sort of, I guess, new version of kind of influencer in a way, and that actually the influencer starts to work with the brands to create something, not just be a kind of an awareness driver or a content creator. They become sort of almost a curator of that brand and that experience, which then I think from a Gen Z perspective, when they come into it and we work with those type of audiences, they communicate the value even better to their peer group. So that's from a luxury perspective, that's some of the trends that we're seeing.
No, I've seen McCallum doing some work at the moment with a couple of very well-known designers, and it's all about, actually, you say it's being authentic, but through collaboration, that then builds the authority and gives you kind of that genuine reason for these organizations to be working with that individual or that design team. That makes a lot of sense. Listen, I just really want to say, first of all, thank you very much to all of you. It's been a great session this morning. I'm conscious of the fact that people have got 11 or 12 o'clock meetings, so we try to wrap up 5 minutes before the hour. I've got a couple of announcements to make. Before I go to my announcements, as it were, I just really wanted to thank everyone on our panel. I suspect we could have spoken for another 90 minutes on this subject. We haven't even spoken about some of the kind of key issues, both to do with sexuality and their attitudes towards sex in general, and how that affects their consumption habits and what brands are targeting that space. We haven't spoken about some of the ways in which they actually act as influencers of actually different audiences, like millennials, and the impact they have in terms of pester power. We'll have to do that another day, I'm afraid. But for now, I just want to thank you all. A couple of things I just wanted to mention that are coming up through Pimento. First of all, the 6 p.m. club is back. It's in London on Thursday next week. If you'd like to join us, you're very welcome to join us. It's at PR, an agency consultancy called Stir PR. I think we've got about 12 spaces left. So if you'd like to join, you can register in the chat box now. Hopefully, Teresa's just putting the link up there. Just follow that link or drop me an email afterwards. I also like to remind Memento members that are on this call that we do need their annual membership survey back again. Really good to get those back. We've had a reasonable number back so far. And as a reminder, for every completed survey, we'll donate £10 to Save Children. And finally, our networking event is back on the road on the 24th of November. This time it's in Great Windsor Park, and it's a short 2-3 mile walk to a pub, inevitably, at the Fox and Hounds. If you'd like to join us for that event, they're always great fun, and it's a great way to get to know people and network in the fresh air, walking to a decent venue. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you to one and all. Thank you for taking time to join us. There will be a video version that's available at all good bookshops and high street retailers, but more importantly online. And we will also be sharing with you the verbatims from today's session, because it was all done by AI. There you go. Great. Thank you very much, and hope to speak to you very soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.